I will introduce Judy Juanita. You know, I first met Judy several years ago at an English department meeting here as a teacher. Little did I know that she had up her sleeve this novel at the time. You know, a lot of people say they're writers, but they never show you their writing. And then, you know, you turn on the radio one night and you hear excerpts from it and you're like, oh. So this is, I was going to hold the book up.
Yes, I am going to pull one up because this is brand new. This is.
And you could buy it? Do you have copies for sale
Yes, I
today?
do. Yes.
This is the hardcover copy.
Yeah.
So I did The Lost Leader. I just Xeroxed you a couple chapters off to tease you, you know, but it's called Virgin Soul, and it's got all kinds of icons, including the Black Panther button, a peace button, a flower, a couple pieces, a couple peace signs, and the three colors of the African flag, right? That's the Marcus Garvey colors,
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right?
Mm-hmm.
Which, you know, of course, a lot of people
The
nowadays
Pan-African
think, well, that's the reggae colors. Well, you know, that's not where reggae. It didn't start with reggae. It's the other way around. But it's a great book. I could read you what somebody says here, but it's been very well acclaimed, and hopefully be acclaimed by you as well. And if you've read some excerpts from it.
So thank you all for letting me be here, and thank you for asking me. You know, I'm happy.
Thank you for saying yes.
Yes, yes. So I'll read just the first sentence of the book so you have that idea of where we are. Actually, I'll read the first paragraph so I can get us into the setting. You know?
Feel free to take notes, people.
Oh, okay, that's great.
It's a good way to listen.
Uncle Boy Boy was a dentist, and Aunt Olare was his wife, and I was not their adored child. I was more obligation than kin, their dark-skinned orphan in residence. I had gotten accepted into SF State as a freshman, but my financial resources amounted to my $72 monthly Social Security check. I wasn't about to ask them to support me. It was 1964 in Oakland, California, and the Monday after I graduated high school, I hot-footed over to Oakland City College and registered. Very soon thereafter, I moved to the Berkeley YWCA for $12.50 a week and kept my head attached to a dictaphone at the Alameda County Welfare Department 20 hours a week to earn my way through school. Thus, 1 month out of high school, July 1964, I hit Oakland City College's summer session. So that's kind of like the setting. I mean, not kind of, it is the setting. Yeah. So you've read some chapters, and I appreciate that. So by the middle of the book comes a pivotal scene. And this is, all of these chapters had titles before, and even one version of the manuscript, every chapter had a title, and then the editor said, no, doesn't mean
The editors took the titles away.
Yes.
Oh, okay. Because I heard, even when I announced you that Allwood chapter, I heard you told me a title.
Yeah, it was Allwood chapter. It was called the 10 Books chapter. That was
Okay.
10, and so many of them, about 16 parts of this, have appeared as short stories elsewhere. Okay, and so anyway, this one it's called the Betty Shabazz chapter.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh yeah, I know what chapter that is.
Okay.
Are you done, or can I ask you a question?
Yeah, please. Yes, interrupt anytime. Yes.
I just wondered when you actually started writing, or if this was memoir writing for you, that you were looking back on it because it has such rich detail in it. Was it memoir writing, or were you writing all along?
It's both. When I first graduated from San Francisco State College, and after I had been in the Black Panther Party, I was about 25 years old, and I realized, oh my goodness, I was a part of history. You know, even though it was still fresh and it was still happening. And I had the grandiose idea of writing a novel then, like many people in their 20s, or 30s or 40s or 50s. but I didn't have the chops. I didn't have the skills at that point. I was a writer, I was a journalist. So what I did was I had a notebook and I just wrote down everything I could remember. I wrote down everybody's name, everybody's nickname. Everybody had a nickname, Squealy, Pop, whatever. I wrote down their nicknames. I wrote down all the sayings that I could remember. People used to greet each other, what it is, yeah, what it ain't, yeah, what it ought to be. I wrote everything down that I could remember because I was thinking, I'm going to write a short story out of this. And I tried several times, but I couldn't do it. I never let go of that notebook. And about every decade or so, I would try it again. And I kept learning new techniques because I first got into poetry. So now looking back, I realized that I was learning how to write creatively a little bit at a time. So I did poetry. Then, my poetry group people said, one of them, she said, Judy Juanita, I just love your writing. She was an old Southern woman, great poet, Juanita Tobin. But she said, but it's so long, honey. Why don't you try playwriting, So that was my sign from the universe. Oh, okay. Because I would be bringing in these 3-page poems, which everybody liked, but you can't. Yes, okay, you get my drift. You can't do that in a poetry workshop. It's greedy. It's taking up too much time. So I did from there go to playwriting, and then from playwriting I was trying short stories all along, but I didn't start getting published as a fiction writer until after I had gotten many of those skills together. And then I was ready to tackle the novel. So by then I had learned what you're learning here, how to take fact, experiences, history, and use the writer's alchemy to turn it into fiction. But so that took me a long time. I'm late bloomer.
Thank you.
Good. Okay. So the first half of the book and most of the stuff that happens with Allwood is definitely made up. Allwood was the kind of boyfriend I, in one sense, could have wanted, but there was no way I was going to touch these nationalist guys who seemed very domineering. There's no way I wanted to be dominated. I came out of a really strict household, and to me, college meant freedom, running wild, doing what I want to do. And what I saw with the nationalist guys, and it'll come out here, was, oh boy, So, Okay, Allwood came back from Caltech the week after I officially got admitted to San Francisco State. I got a jolt.
Oh, I'm sorry, please.
Yes, sir.
Just to set it
Yes.
up, this occurs after the 10 books chapter.
Oh, yes.
And it occurs after chapter 9. What chapter is this?
This is chapter 22. It's
Okay.
the middle of the book.
Okay,
Yeah.
just so people, so this
Yes.
is after most of
This
the
is
stuff.
long after, yeah.
It's before the meeting of Miri Baraka, but it's after the other 2 chapters.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. She hasn't gone to San Francisco State yet. I got a jolt when he walked in the front door, but he looked odd. His car coat didn't fit anymore. Allwood, your wrists are sticking out of your coat. Have you grown? I grew almost an inch. In 3 months, I couldn't believe it. Even my shirt size went up half an inch. I still dug him. That hit me. I wasn't expecting old times. We'd only talked on the phone, the soul sister and the intellectual, the 2 clouds, no longer one behind the other. When he suggested we drive to San Francisco State so I'd know the way, I didn't say I knew it by heart already. Before we left, he asked if I had gotten rid of his dashiki. Of course not. Do you still want it? I want to wear it. He put it on in front of me. It felt strange to see his underarm hair and his arms paler than his face. Are you spending a lot of time in the math lab? Like a big dog. That's one of those expressions we used to use then, like a big dog, Okay. He put his car coat over the dashiki. You need to dump your car coat in the Goodwill bin. Just don't forget your sweater, Janice, he said. I don't need it. I had on my pink Levi's, my flat-ribbed poor boy top and clogs. It's sunny. Allwood grabbed my sweater on the way out. It gets cold in Frisco, the ocean. I know the city. It was misting when we came out on the Treasure Island side of the Bay Bridge. We drove past downtown San Francisco and switched freeways after Army Street. When we headed west, we hit the fog. The rusted windshield wipers began to squeak against the glass, which ordinarily got on my nerves, but I was all wound up. When I saw the signs pointing us to the zoo and San Francisco State, something started to vibrate in my gut. We rolled through the fog on 19th Avenue alongside a Muni streetcar. My heart jumped in my chest as the campus, my campus, sloped into view. It was deserted except for a cadre of gray and white seagulls poking through the gust of fog. A marble block stood at the entrance, a message from the ages carved on it. I twisted my neck to read it, rolling down the window, but the cold rushed in. Put your sweater on, G, Allwood said. I yanked it off the back seat and put it on. Were you excited when you enrolled at Caltech? Allwood nodded. For a few minutes, we sat in the VW next to the 4-story library. I started babbling and wasn't paying close attention as I started the drive back. Transferring is out there, Allwood said. So much stuff to get straight. He pointed us down the Bayshore Highway toward the San Francisco airport. Where are we going? I asked. To see Betty Shabazz. I didn't know what he was talking about. We're going to see Betty Shabazz? We're going to see Betty Shabazz at the San Francisco airport. She's the main speaker at the Malcolm X program tomorrow. She's arriving from back east around 1:30. Betty Shabazz in the flesh? I couldn't believe it. We left the city, past Brisbane, and the homes cascading across the hills of South San Francisco in pastel stucco lines, little boxes made of ticky-tacky. We had passed the bare brown hills with waving grasses and wildflowers when Allwood said, my dad signed the pink slip. Over to you. He knew we were sharing the VW anyway. He pulled it out of his coat pocket. I didn't know what to say. I hadn't paid a penny for this car. I took the pink slip. Thanks, Allwood. I didn't mention that the Bug needed a new carburetor. Nobody had given me anything since high school graduation when my Aunt Zenobia sent me 3 dozen yellow roses. My ears had gotten warm then, and they warmed now as I held the pink slip between my thumb and the steering wheel. They got burning hot. I thought of the word beneficiary. I was his beneficiary, like he had died and gone to heaven and left me a used Volkswagen. It felt good. I turned my mind toward Betty Shabazz. Would she look sorrowful, fierce, happy, proud? I wondered if she'd have on all black. I pictured what she might have worn to Malcolm X's funeral. I pictured the draped black veil on Mrs. Kennedy. I wanted Betty Shabazz's veil to be blacker, heavier, more profound. Malcolm X wasn't in the nation when he died. Had she followed him out, faithful wife? Did she still pray 5 times a day? I thought of how I would look if I joined the nation, wearing those long skirts all day. Janice, X. I couldn't picture it. Allwood and I went into the airport terminal. Another brother in a dashiki, squinting at the late afternoon sun, stepped between Allwood and me. I thought he was an African tourist until I saw him slap Allwood's hand. Escort the sister back to the car, Brother Allwood. I was geared up to see Betty Shabazz, the closest I'd ever get to see Malcolm X, the man himself. She's cool, Allwood told him. No, she's not, the brother said, walking backward, one hand on the rifle and the other held up between us. Stuff just went down. The brothers from the Black Panthers in Oakland almost got into it with the pigs. All 3 of us seemed to be going in different directions. What's happening? I asked, trying to move toward Allwood. The sister should be at home taking care of her business. He stepped in front of me, blocking me. I walked around him. Sister, I'm sorry, but you're out of line. Allwood turned, impatient with the brother, I thought. Instead, he said, Janice, go back and wait in the car. Wait for what? I want to meet Betty Shabazz. Sister, this is not a tea party. This is life and death. I'm together. No, you're holding your man up and you're holding me up. And that's reactionary. We're ready to protect the lady, he said, patting his side. I looked up at Allwood, but he was acting like I was something that had dropped out of his nose. I grabbed hold of his sleeve. Tell me this doesn't mean I can't see Betty Shabazz. He shrugged, and the brother said, This ain't the time. Oh, I get it, I said. No, if you got it, the brother said, you would have got to stepping. He turned to leave and Allwood started walking with him. I stood there fuming, my lips poked out to the air controller's tower. It occurred to me that if I were anybody but Janice Hightower, black girl from East Oakland, I would have been able to see her. Joe Blow from Kokomo rides on a plane for 8 hours, New York City to San Francisco, and never recognizes her or the legacy she's carrying right next to him. I started after Allwood. I knew he was listening to me, even if the other brother was a stone wall. Allwood, if I was an ordinary passenger from Sebastopol or Coma coming in on her flight, then I would get to see her. To them, she's a colored woman on a plane. They don't see Betty Shabazz. And he's gonna tell me I'm not important enough to see her? See you at the car, Allwood said. Allwood, he's telling you I'm not important at all. Am I numb or dumb? Not me, sweetheart. I felt ripped off big time, but I was beginning to lose my cool. I looked around and saw more brothers with rifles lined up in twos. A gang of policemen walked briskly past me. I walked behind them, the police and the brothers giving each other the evil eye. No one tried to stop me. In the waiting area, brothers lined up near the gate, police and 2 sisters with big bow afros and African wraps behind them. I smiled. One nodded grimly. The other pointed to the tarmac and said, Sister Betty's plane is here. I got excited. The sister who had nodded touched my arm as if to call me. An old cop, a Broderick Crawford type, walked up to the brothers with a camera. The next thing I knew, Huey Newton stepped up to him as bold and as straight backed as he had stood in my history class at Oakland City and said, "Don't take any pictures." A knot formed in my stomach. Bobby Seale moved in front of the camera with his knock-kneed self. The cop acted like he was going to take pictures anyway. For an instant, everyone stood there transfixed. Huey said, "We're going to smash it." And I remembered his high-pitched voice. Then I heard him call out, "Jive, racist cop." Huey started talking as if he was lecturing the whole airport. If he takes any pictures, he's going to provoke something. That's where it's going to start at. You're not supposed to end the sentence with a proposition, I said silently. "Right now," Huey said with finality. The police began talking as if they were persuading the one with the camera to back off. I thought, he can't shoot pictures and people at the same time. I flashed on all the times I had seen boys and men, always colored, always in East Oakland, always spread-eagled against patrol cars, or wrists manacled in the small of their bags, lying on the ground like trash. Never face-to-face, never. Stealthy calm settled in, like a kind of truce that everyone had agreed to invisibly as the plane taxied in. I spotted Allwood up real close to the gate, and I wanted to shout, "Allwood, you're a bystander, this is where it's at." I'd have to tell him everything that had happened on the way back. Passengers streamed off the plane, an unbroken line of white passengers, one after another. I wondered if we'd all come here merely to confront each other. Then I saw her. I recognized her straightened hairdo with the deep bangs, her smile between a grimace and smiling ugly. She extended her arm in greeting, and a circle of brothers and sisters and then cops formed around her like rings on a tree. Everyone looked so serious, but when she looked my way, I gave her my 52-tooth smile. She acknowledged me. My fear and resentment fell away, as if she'd sheared them off. Then the phalanx of men with cops motored her through the airport like a Rose Bowl float. I was so giddy. Outside the terminal, Allwood and I met up. I was euphoric, but he looked just the opposite. He told me to drive because he had to go with the brothers. He told me where everyone was headed, the Ramparts office, magazine office downtown. I got a little lost, but I got there. I parked the bug, got out, and saw Allwood standing across the street listening to a brother who I could see from the back had on countrified wide cuff jeans and a black leather coat. He was sounding on Allwood something ferocious. "If you're gonna be for real, then be for real," he was saying. "Petty bullshit, cultural nationalist bullshit is bullshit, dig?" Allwood didn't say anything, didn't nod his head, and didn't acknowledge me when I came up to them. He was mute. "I waited for you," I said to him. "Shut up," the brother in the coat said to me without even looking at me. Oh, that pissed me off. I thought I'd left that at the airport. What's the deal here? The deal is your man ain't got no gun, he said, finally turning to face me. You ain't packing, he said to Alwood like I wasn't there. How was you supposed to defend her? With your fists? A dictionary? Chairman Mao says power comes from the barrel of the gun. And Jimmy Alwood said, and Jimmy Baldwin said, don't quote that faggoty bullshit from Martin Luther King. That intellectual bullshit ain't playing here. Either you willing to die for the people or you bullshit. Always spoke. I know what my duty to the masses is. No, you don't. The other brother said, you think the masses are asses. I love my people, Alwood said. Enough to die for them? Don't lie, don't front. You couldn't front there. The brother pointed to the building. I'm kind of modifying it a little bit. So don't try to front me off. I know you going to school to get your GNP degree, your good Negro papers, so you can dictate to the masses and eat crumbs from the massa. I got your number, Brother Alwood, and it don't even add up to one. Your mind is revolutionary, but your heart is bourgeois. You're the one, Alwood said, making a big mistake, writing off brothers with skills. Viet Cong ain't got nothing but rice, man, and they kicking ass. Degree is your excuse. When the revolution takes place, Alwood said, and shit goes down, believe me, brother, the people will need engineers, doctors, lawyers, social scientists, nuclear physicists. You can wear all the Malcolm X sweatshirts and snick buttons you want. Brother, your shit is not deep. If you ain't willing to give the imperialists an ass kicking when it counts, how you gonna walk up to the victory table and say, what? You was too busy studying to fight? He shook his head. We can train the people. Not that fast, Alwood said. Look at Guinea. They're struggling, man. Yeah, man. After they chase out the colonialists, the British, the French, they have to deal with rebuilding skills. Do you realize that only 10% of adult Africans can read and write? 10%? All I know is this. These brothers in there from Oakland pulled some coattail today. I'm from Oakland, man. I grew up in Oakland, Alwood said. I piped in. And I'm from Oakland. I know Huey and Bobby from City. He stared at me and said, sister, it's not who you know, it's how you know them. He continued to talk to Alwood. Those brothers in there, they're the real deal, man. Huey had a shotgun. Bobby was carrying a gun. The young dudes were loaded with guns. Man, loaded. The Black Panther Party of Northern California looked like fools. Man, they calling them paper panthers. I ain't a paper nothing. Is that what you want to go down as? For a minute, they didn't talk. They just stared eyeball to eyeball. I had helped Alwood fill out his application to Caltech. I knew what he wanted to go down as because I had typed it, physicist. You know what's the most important thing you can do, the brother said? Quit school for a year and struggle for the people day and night. Can you do that? Alwood stood mute. I'm not quitting school, he said. I have to get my degree or I'm useless. Your parents drill that into your head, the other brother said. There's nothing worse than a smart black man without an education. How about smart without a conscience, the brother said. I got back in. What about all the sacrifices our parents and grandparents made to get us to this point? All their struggles were fought so we could become educated. This is a movement, the brother said, from the bottom up, not the top down. It's not about being better than somebody else. Our grandparents weren't talking about being better than, as good as, and able to help other people as well. Alwood, give the people 1 year. Even white boys go to Africa for the Peace Corps for 2 years. My scholarship's open this year. I have to finish and then help my people. Trying to skip through them. Scholarship, the utmost scorn filled the brother's face. Inside I screamed, if I had been offered one, I would have jumped on it, baby cakes, and you would too. Huey says cultural nationalism is irrelevant and romantic, the brother said, walking away, shaking his head. And wearing a dashiki ain't a solution, brother. I drove Allwood back to Berkeley in complete silence, keeping an eye on the Bay Bridge traffic. I glanced at the ships coming into port, the Seagulls, Alcatraz, Treasure Island, the Port of Oakland, the Naval Supply Center, the mud flats in Emeryville that ran along the shoreline. I got off the Nimitz Freeway where it began stretching toward Sacramento and the American West. At Ashby Avenue, the south end of Berkeley, my hometown, my city, home, I pulled up next to the incinerator outside the apartment and yanked the emergency brake. Allwood, why didn't you tell me this Betty Shabazz thing was about guarding her? I thought we were going to see her. All you had to do was hit me to the fact that at least some of the brothers would have guns. He didn't say anything. Bodyguards and guns go together. I wasn't thinking about it, he said. Well, Allwood, that's fucked. Who else had guns? Just the brothers with Huey and Bobby. The group, our group, talked it out last night. The ones who came brought unloaded guns. Unloaded guns? I shrieked. Oh, that's some stand-up outlaws. He didn't say anything for a few long seconds. He didn't want to talk about it with me. Students are the oppressed, he said as we went inside. When you understand that, you know that you struggle against the system wherever you go, wherever that is. For me, it's Caltech. Wow. Allwood. He's a teacher, not a social changer. That hit me so hard. I had to brace myself against the door as he changed out of his dashiki and talked. The study of our history, our struggle, our oppression is all preparation for service to the community. When we got inside, Allwood folded the dashiki carefully. Suddenly, he shook it all out, rolled it in a ball, put on his car coat and stuffed it in a pocket. It looks like an abscess growing out of your rib, I said. It doesn't matter, he said. He shifted it to the other pocket, then looked at me. I guess we should say goodbye, he said. I wasn't used to a sheepish Allwood. Hasn't it been nice knowing me, he said. I said, hasn't it been nice knowing me? I said. He smiled. Not nice, deep. We kissed, but it wasn't mush-mush. Sweet, but no mush. He said, your lips are still soft. Well, what was so deep about it, I asked. Everything, and then some. No, be for real, I prodded. After all this time, was it for real? Of course it was for real. Then what about it was most for real? You can't quantify it like that. You're a scientist, aren't you? A smile spread across his seriousness. You know the Model T Ford, he said. Of course I know. But can you name the cars that came after it? Chrysler, Plymouth? No, I don't know. That's because you always remember the first one. That's the D. Then I won't forget you. I stood as he nodded and walked down the driveway to the street. The bunched up dashiki made his coat protrude on one side. He turned and gave me a wave. I didn't want to get corny on you, he yelled back at me. I know, I yelled. I know, reverberated until I couldn't see him anymore. I know. I started to shiver. When I clasped my doorknob, it sent an even colder current through my palm. So that's the end of, it's set up in basically 4 sections, freshman year, sophomore year. So that's the end of first 2 years of college.
Does anybody have any questions about that section, or the ones that we read?
So as I was reading this, I was thinking that in Oakland in particular, people have these very cherished and maybe idealized memories of the movement and of what happened during those years. And so I'm wondering how you decided how you would portray these things and these iconic figures, and was there anything you deliberately left out?
Yes, and I brought a handout because I'm a teacher, to show you what I did. Okay, yes, indeed. Yeah, okay, that's quite enough.
Can I get one too?
Yes, of course, I have quite enough.
I love that, from the rage to the page.
Yes, yeah, there's, I overwrite, number one. When I finally had a full manuscript that that really was ready to go, it was about 650 pages. And I submitted it to 3 agents. They said, absolutely not. You know, no way. So, but they gave me very helpful suggestions. And when the agent who finally took it on, she took it on when it was 450 pages. And one of the things she said, Judy, everything about the Panthers is not interesting. You know? You know? So, you know, I think that I had to learn how to put things in story form and make them interesting, and sometimes stick to facts, and then sometimes turn in another direction. So this little handout is about that. I've written this, and it's on the internet. It's called 5 Comrades in the Black Panther Party. I think that's the name of it. But
And you have your own website, right? Is that? Or
yes.
Should I write that down on the board, or people?
Judy Juanita's Virgin Soul. Yeah. No, I didn't put it on here. It's just
Okay.
Judy Juanita's Virgin Soul. So
Just
it's
write
an
it
S
down,
after Judy Juanita. JudyJuanitasVirginSoul.com. So the weekling.com is a essay a day on zine, and I contribute often to that. So I contributed a part about the 5 of us. My roommates and I were the first 5 young people from San Francisco State to join the party. And the party had come to state just like IBM and Clorox coming to college to recruit, okay, like career day. And we went, and that's in the book, you know. So I had a storehouse of memories because I was there during that was basically 67, 68, parts of 69. So I was there really in the beginning, and not later on, you know. So people are always asking me, do you know this Panther, do you know that? But I know some of the ones who were there right then when I was there, you know, and I of course know lots of people from San Francisco State. So this was what's on this page, at the first half of the page, was a very touchy thing, okay? My roommates and I, we all worked very closely in the party. I worked with Eldridge and Kathleen on the newspaper, and so we saw a lot of things, you know. So this is what I experienced. The roomies and I go to Eldridge's one morning waiting for Kathleen. We see her beauty marks, the black and blue ones. This morning they're on her legs. We get the elbows to going, the eyes to rolling. Sometimes they're on her arms. This is repellent and entertaining. We talk about it casually. Everyone does. In jail, behind the glass, Eldridge says he wishes Kathleen had an automatic beating machine so she could beat herself while he's gone. Okay? So that's factual, and this was in one draft, okay? So I took it out, okay? Okay, so then when I changed it, I think you can see it. This is what I changed it to. The roomies and I go to Eldridge's one morning waiting for Kathleen. When she comes in the room, she has the same look she wore when we were introduced. We see her beauty marks, the black and blue ones. This morning they're on her legs. We get the elbows to going, the eyes to rolling. Sometimes they're on her arms, sometimes her face. Then this is what I had added, one draft. I wish somebody would try to beat on me like a damn drum. I don't care how famous his ass is. This is repellent, entertaining. We talk about it casually, everyone does. So that also didn't go in. Okay? What went in was necessary for narrative, to keep the narrative moving. In jail, behind the glass, Eldridge says he wishes Kathleen had an automatic beating machine so she could beat herself while he's gone. Now, this is why it didn't go in. First of all, this is not so much a tell-all. I think you can read it and see it's not a tell-all. It's, you know, What happened with Eldridge and Kathleen is public knowledge by now. There was a long article. What was this magazine called? New California. Remember, it was a California monthly. It came out, and
I'm from the East Coast.
oh, you're from the East Coast. Okay, sorry. So anyway, it's documented. The man was interviewing Eldridge for a big interview, and when he went to interview him, he said, "Where's Kathleen?" And he said, "Oh, I didn't give her beating for today or whatever." So it's in several other places.
Right.
Why do I know it's in several other places? Because this whole manuscript had to be vetted by the lawyers at Viking. And the lawyer went over this with me over and over again, and I had to show her 5 or 6 different places where it's historically true, okay? But I didn't need it for my narrative. But I had come a long way through though. So one part, yes, I wrote down actually what happened, what I saw with my roommates. Then I added this outrage, but that really wasn't where I was going. When I had to narrow this down, when the agent said, the literary agent, Bonnie Nadell, was really top literary agent, when she said, you're gonna have to cut 100 to 150 pages from the 450 page version, I had to cut out a lot of stuff. When I was in my MFA writing workshop, I was so proud, and everyone congratulated me on being able to come in with 20-page stories and 30-page stories. I can write at length. But okay, so I get out of the rarefied atmosphere of my MFA program at San Francisco State, and I get out of the rarefied atmosphere of submitting short stories to literary magazines. They will accept long stories. Then I get into what my friend calls the publishing house meat grinder. No, I don't know if you noticed, but these chapters are very short, So when they came back and said, cut, it's not as simple as just those. First of all, it took me 2 or 3 months just to digest. I'm gonna have to cut my precious work, my life work. Took me a while, but then I began to see, I have to make a story that moves along, so.
Can I ask you a question? Are you at a point now, it's been about a little more than 2 years now since it's come out, and at a point where
2.5 years.
Part of you feels like, there's a lot of gems in what I cut out. I could publish these as like fugitive pieces or as a director's cut eventually, use the movie term, eventually, or something of that sort, or are they pretty much things that you're just like letting go at this point?
I felt like that for a while, for a few months after I was, after it came out, and yeah, I felt like that for probably 6 or 7 months, I can't remember. But then I wanted to get on. And especially after going around with the book and touring, it was like, oh no, there's so much.
You've been living with these characters for so long that you were.
It was time to let them go, and I did let them go. I feel like it's my baby, and it's out in the world now, and I'm interested in selling it, but I've written, I actually have 3 manuscripts that I've written since then that are ready to go, and actually I've sent them to the 2 of them to the agent, and she said no, because she's about the big book. They wanted this to be a big book, it didn't sell big book, but that's the reason why a company like this buys this, but it wasn't, because they can't predict what's going to be, Yes, let's, over here.
Oh, yes.
Well, I'll make this as loaded as possible.
Okay.
Point 1, what advice would you offer to someone who, probably all of us, who are, finished manuscripts, finished collected works, and are trying to get to agents, trying to get to, knocking on doors, sending out query letters and all that? Like, what would you say be, not the magic bullet, but that finite next step that will get you to get not a formatted rejection letter back, or a formatted thank you so much but we're not interested in this time, and So
Okay.
point B,
Okay.
how do you, the section I read where Janice, meets Fatima and then she shaves her hair off, how do you navigate, especially since mostly people in this classroom are women, the aspects of, or how do you teach and tell the aspects of womanism versus feminism, or within regards to feminism? That's
Wow. Yes, two very loaded questions. Okay, the first one, you'll pretty much find the standard advice everywhere. You've got to, of course, have the best that you can do. Polish your writing through writing workshops and through polishing your craft. Those are givens that you're learning here. And then you've got to have a killer query letter, okay? Killer query letter, and they tell you on the internet. There's a way, you've got to, there's, it's all over the internet. A query letter. My agent said if a writer can't write a query letter, it makes me wonder, why should I read the manuscript? So that's something. Networking through going to the writing workshops. Okay, that was our advice from my MFA instructor, Molly Giles. I was at San Francisco State, and she asked all of us to go to Squaw Valley Community Writers Workshop. And these things cost money. I didn't have the money, but I applied anyway, and I got a partial fellowship, and then I, had to come up with about $400 on my own. But it's very interesting. Molly said, shoot your best shot, bring your best work. Don't send out, what do you call the people on the bench, the bench warmers? You guys have sports metaphors, bench, send out your best work. The Black House is what sold this book. The Black House is what got all the attention. The one where she goes to the Black House.
That's chapter 9. That's one of the ones you guys have.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the Black House was actually my first chapter for years, okay? Because that was the best. And then finally the agent said, one of the agents said, he said, Judy, all the other chapters have to come up to the quality of the best of the Black House. You need to go back to the woodshed and work on it, So when I went to Squaw Valley though, the Black House, almost in that form, because I had really polished it, was what got me the agent, okay? So those are things. You have to put your best shot out there, So does that kind of answer that? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so then the womanism versus feminism thing, I think that's a very interesting question, and I write on that a lot in the essays that I write. I'm very interested in the dynamics between Black men and Black women, and I try to bring those out all the time in my writing, because I think there's such a dearth. I don't know where's my English teacher? Is that the right to say?
Yes.
Such a dearth of that in popular literature, in definitely in movies. How Black people talk to each other. It's not existent. It's non-existent, and it's shocking to me. And some of my white friends, white writers, they were asking me to explain that, and I said, there's this movie called Grand Canyon. I don't know if you remember it. And Danny Glover and Alfred Woodard were the Black couple, and I said, the dialogue that went on between the Black man and the Black woman was very, very limited, and yet the dialogue between the white male, female, whatever, it was very, very developed, and Bill Cosby used to say that the writers for Hollywood, he said they were drive-by writers, meaning they drive by the ghetto and get a snatch of dialogue to put into the sitcoms or what have you. So I am always aware of that, and I'm always trying to counteract that, because, if anything, I definitely know how Black people talk to one another, So does that kind of begin to answer that? Or, yeah, okay. Yes, ma'am.
This is more of a sociological question, rather than a literary question. You were reading, you were talking about how the brothers were scorning that being smart without a conscience. And I was, kind of looking around into facts and figures about African Americans, the situation today versus the 60s. And 50% of blacks are, people on death row are blacks, even though there's 13% of the population. And 27% of blacks aren't below the poverty line, whereas 9% of whites are. And in the 5 or 6 decades that Fortune magazine's been following CEOs in major corporations, only 15 of them have been black. We have a black president, and he's smart without a conscience. Okay, sort of black, right? Thinks he's black. But
He's black. He's black.
Is he?
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
Yeah. Okay.
But my point is, smart without a conscience. That struck me. That's what he was saying, because where is the movement? I mean, do you think it's time for radical social change? And if you do, is it something we should do within the system or without the system? Or do you think, the numbers are the same virtually that they were in the 60s, and you're in there, you guys are out there fighting, you're getting things done, you're moving, you're grooving, and nothing's being done today. What do you think about that?
I beg to differ. I think a lot is being done, but it's happening in a different way, as from what I can see.
Inside, right? Is that what you think?
Well, I'm not saying inside, outside. For instance, Occupy, okay? Occupy was a phenomenon. It raised the consciousness of people. Many people, Occupy Wall Street, Occupy Oakland, Occupy St. Louis, Missouri, St. Louis. They went and they're working on foreclosures now, okay? So then the environmental movement, something happens, an oil spill, people are mobilized around these issues. Then, some people protest PETA, are PETA protesters, and they protest animals being in circuses. Don't go to Barnum and Bailey. Don't go to circuses. So all over, we can name 1,000 others, plus 1,000 times 1,000 other kind of movements all over the world that are happening, where people, the regular people, are saying, wait a minute, something's wrong. It's just that it's not all like in the 60s, everything converged, finally at once, through all those images from the civil rights movement. Everything converged in the 60s with the young white kids coming out of the gray flannel suit in the Mad Men era, and then the blacks and so forth. It all kind of converged at once. All the music, the rock music, R&B, in Motown, everything converged. The music, social consciousness, theater, theater was very radical, street theater, the nudist movement, the sex, the birth control pill. So that was a spectacular, ring,
Right.
But now it's happening almost in a different way. But we have this internet, which has exploded consciousness. Just like when the students were in China, when Tiananmen Square, because they had the fax machine, they could fax out those pictures and say, no, the bulldozers are running over students in the square. They still don't admit to that and don't, acknowledge that. But we know. So there was something he used to say, I can't remember, it was like the people's spirit is greater than the man's technology, something like that. In other words, the people, we're human beings. They want to have a better life. That's what's happening. I certainly don't want anybody to be beheaded or anything, but those guys, those men, what do they call them? ISIS, you know? It's a people's movement too, you know? It's people, I mean, yeah, from my 2 cents, it's a retrograde movement, and maybe it's financed by some, you know, some very fascistic, whatever kind of people, but, you know, it's, I don't know, Thomas Friedman of the New York Times said, what's going on right now is, you know, 500 million people or more are being brought out of dark ages into 21st century. Here they are, you know, so there's gonna be all these collisions, there's gonna be all these movements, you know. I'm a teacher too here, you know, and, you know, I just want my students to read and to be aware. And then once people are aware, I trust that human beings, the human being in people will come out, you know. If I didn't have that kind of feeling, then I would just give up. And I would say there's no use, the 1%, that's it. But I believe, you know, when something like Occupy happens, you know, when the AIDS movement happened, that mobilized, you know, the gay community around AIDS, you know, and they became much more militant. Is that kind of?
Yeah. Thanks a lot.
You guys are asking really loaded questions. Yes.
Any other questions?
Yes.
Was it really challenging while attending college and working with the Black Panthers at the same time?
Yes and no. Thank you. Okay. The 60s were so exciting, and I was young. I was 16 years old when I started Oakland City College, which was the Grove Street campus, you know, over, you know, on Grove Street. So I.
Which later became known as Merritt, right? The old
Yes, yes, they moved it up to Merritt. So I came from a background where you're supposed to get a college education, and so the difficult part was always justifying what I was doing to my parents, and I had several fallouts with them, several big fallouts. One, we used to have a store called the White Front on, I don't know if anybody remembers that here.
We had it in LA, I grew up in Los Angeles.
Okay, White Front, and we used to make big jokes about this store, you know, like white people are coming in to take over or whatever. But my, you know, my father and I had this huge argument, and my father was a race man, which is in the South means a black man who stands up for the race. But all they wanted me to do was finish college, just finish college, and I kept getting off track, you know, and I'd have to explain it to them. So that was a contradiction there, but it was so exciting. I'm sorry. The 60s were, people just don't like to tell people that, you know, and it wasn't all about getting high. It was, there were protests in the street. There were, and the Bay Area in particular was very, very different scene. The Bay Area was open all night. Okay, so when you walked from the campus at Berkeley all the way down Telegraph into Oakland, okay, there was food, there were hippies in trucks with their dogs, you know, with the psychedelic VW buses painted, you know, people camping out. We didn't call it homeless then. People just lived in and out of their trucks. So, you know, you got up in the middle of the night and, you know, you got high, you know, after you finished working, doing hard revolutionary struggle, and you go out to get something to eat at 2 a.m., and there's people all out in the street. I mean, it's just exciting time.
Sounds like what I missed about New York.
Yeah. So
Did you actually have a Volkswagen Beetle?
Yes, I did. Oh,
Okay.
yes, absolutely.
Okay.
I always say the reason that there was a revolution in California was because of two things: the community colleges, where we only paid $2 for an ID card, 0 tuition. Okay? Okay? Or as we say now, okay? You know, that was one, and the other one was the Volkswagen. My first Volkswagen cost about $450, whatever. you know, so we all had VWs, and we could jump in them, and did go from Oakland to New York in 3 days if 2 or 3 of us got it and drove, okay? And then gas was like 29 cents or 30 cents a gallon. That's why there was a revolution here, because we had the time to go through community college. And if you were smart, you went through and did 60, you used up the full 70 units. So that when you transferred to San Francisco State, then it was a big deal, because, oh my gosh, the tuition was $48 a semester. Oh my gosh, you know, so yes and no. School was the least interesting place to be. The actual classroom, dead. It was dead, because we hadn't changed the curriculum yet. There was no Black Studies before, you know, the 60s. So it was studying about dead white men, which wasn't a turn on at that point.
And that actually, you know, to go back to his original question too,
Yes,
I mean,
yes,
not
sir.
that you weren't, but just to pick up the thread, one thing I noticed in the book is that I would say that if there were 1 or 2 central conflicts that moved throughout the whole book, and you can kind of see it in Allwood versus the militant who he's talking to, that then, you know, I always got the sense that the narrator is siding more and identifies much more with Allwood in that argument, you know, James Baldwin over
Yes.
Mao.
Yes.
You know, and the way it ends with getting the master's degree diploma at the end, which is the last thing of the book, that tension that you're talking about between the party and the school seems to be one of the main tensions. The other tension is also the male versus female tension,
Yes.
I would say.
Yes.
But I felt that it comes together historically, and this gets touched on in the book as well, in that a lot of the Panthers were also very much involved with the student strikes that happened, that led to the Black Studies program, that
Yes.
that
Yes.
is kind of lurking in the background of the book as you take some of the courses that were in the new curriculum,
Yes.
or as not, I shouldn't
Yes.
say you, but as the
No.
narrator does.
Yeah, and that's what happened in reality. Those of us who joined the Black Panther Party from San Francisco State around 67, 68, many of the students never dropped out, and I actually never dropped out. I just withdrew from classes. But then we came back to San Francisco State. We were actually the Black Panther Party on campus. We were the campus branch of it. And my boyfriend, who became my husband, Clarence Thomas, you may have heard of him. He led the longshoreman strike. He's a longshoreman leader with the ILWU, and he always gets introduced as the real Clarence Thomas. But you know, but he was campus coordinator for the Black Panther Party then at that time. So we came back and created led the longest student strike in the history of college campuses, you know, and established the nation's first Black Studies department, and then the first School of Ethnic Studies there. So it was all related.